Good day, and thank you for joining Tyler Duncan Realty Partners for a monthly podcast on this Friday, August 15th. My name is Chad Tyler, and I'm here with my colleagues, Brian Duncan, my partner, and also Charles Shapiro. Brian, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone from the suburbs of DC.
Mr. Shapiro?
Hello, I'm out in Mexico. You can see the wonderful background over here. So enjoying life in Mexico right now.
We're jealous, man. It looks nice there.
It is.
Well, again, thanks for joining us today. So today we're going to hit three hot topics as we sit here in August of 2025. We're going to start off, we're going to talk about the DC office market and specifically what the current administration's policy impacts are having on the office market in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Then from there, we're going to move into data center development, talk about that a little bit. Everybody knows that's a hot sector right now in the industrial sector. We're going to talk more about that, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges. And then we're going to get into an update on the residential market, specifically for the Washington, D.C. and extended metropolitan area. So with that, Charles, why don't you start us off and jump into the policy impacts on the Washington, D.C. market from the current administration, and Brian, I will join you in that discussion.
Well, thank you, Chad. You know, it's interesting because the what you're going to be talking about, the data center market, is really what has been the big development in the Washington, D.C. region going beyond the federal government. I mean, so much of the nation's internet goes through the Washington, D.C. area. So it's the one part of the market that may be able to help the DC area. But looking at the impact of the Trump administration's policies on the DC market, we know that when he was elected, the business industry was really excited about two major things. Number one, that Trump was going to slash regulation. Ultimately, for businesses, that obviously means that they slash costs. And the second was that he wanted a mandate to move workers back to the office. And, real estate has been really depressed simply because, what are we at now? About 60% occupancy of offices from pre-COVID days. I mean, 40% of the people that were there before are now working from home, which impacts all sorts of businesses, hotels, dry cleaners, restaurants. They're all impacted by this. And so they were very excited about that mandate. And he did make that mandate coming back in. They wanted to move people back to the office. Then going further, he started to implement other policies that could have a very negative influence on the office market. Number one, eliminating, consolidating a bunch of the agencies in DC and doing it very quickly. He then, I believe as his first week in office, put out an executive order saying that they were going to sell approximately 2/3 of the federal office stock, and they're going to cancel a majority of the office leases. Obviously, these things are really scary, creating a lot of uncertainty in the office market, and especially when you're talking about selling 2/3 of the office stock. A lot of that office is really not stuff that can be easily turned into office for the private sector. They're huge office plates. They're, these floors that just don't work. And so I think LaFont Plaza, they did some estimates on what it would cost to redevelop those buildings. And they're talking $185 million simply to renovate that. The other thing that's really interesting is that we're right now in DC at all-time highs. The DC market is about 17.3% vacant. The market availability is 19.5%. The vacancy downtown is close to 20%. So we're at all-time highs. And if you talk to the pundits, the co-stars, the CBREs, people like that, they're thinking, well, we're close to a bottom. But if you start eliminating all these agencies and all this office, all of a sudden they're now saying, we don't think this is going to recover until 2019. And we think that vacancies can go up by 2 percentage points, which is when you're talking 20 to 22% or something in that range, you're talking 10% higher. It's a major drag on the market. And let's remember that in DC, the office market is 11% federal government. Also, the federal government, as we were talking about earlier, they impact other jobs. For every employee, there's 2 contractors. So these are private sector businesses that are going to be impacted by these policies. So, it's this level of uncertainty about where things are going. The trend right now, which is the trend also in Denver, of seeing renewals happen, but they're happening to smaller spaces. So the 30,000 square foot tenant is now moving into a new building that might be 10,000 square feet. Now, this slide is interesting. I talked about earlier about 11% of the office stock in DC being federal. They also, take up about 11% of the workforce. So right now, we're finding out that DC, which everyone used to say is recession-proof, isn't, because the federal government is now going to be the ones that may dictate the downswing in the market. You can also see that there's 130 million square feet of office out there. Now, you can go back to that slide. Over here, it's talking about what percentage of leases are cancelable. So these are legally cancelable. We also know with the Trump administration, he has no problem going in and seeing if he can do things that he thinks are the right things to do, whether the law says he can do it or not. So here we're talking about through 2029, they can legally cancel 37% of the leases, and we know they're going to try to cancel more, and we'll see legally whether they have the ability to do that. So, guys, I want to hear from you all, because both of you, Brian, you're in the market 100%. Chad, you've been there for years and years. So I want to hear your thoughts about what you think is going on and how these policies will impact the DC marketplace.
Brian, you want to start?
Chad's going to talk about data centers in a minute, so I won't steal that thunder. But that, as Charlie brought up, it's going to be what potentially recovers some of the investor market. The other interesting thing that we talked off on camera about is that the leases are getting to be smaller and smaller leases. People still want to have a presence, but they don't feel that they're going to have as large a presence. 1 in 4 restaurants in DC predicts that they're closing by the end of the year. So that's even with bringing people back to the market, back to the office space. So that's going to impact even further supply and other issues. What are those people that are leasing residential properties that were just recently built in DC? Where are they going to move to? Which city are they going to leave to, leaving DC even more vacant property on both sides, the residential and commercial? It's impactful.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think those are great points. A little bit more on the positive side, and by no means is this a silver bullet, but the DC market across the nation is the second leading market in terms of converting offices into apartments, and it's only second behind New York. So right now, DC has about 6,500 units in the pipeline in terms of conversions from office to apartments, and New York is about 8,500. So the two together are sort of leading the nation by quite a bit in that regard. And I think, even though it's clear that some of the administration's policies have had some pretty immediate impact, we're still sort of waiting to see how long it's going to take in terms of what the ultimate long-term effect is going to be on the market. But the Washington, D.C. and extended metropolitan market still tends to be an attractive market from international folks, moving into the area. We have a great educational system, great hospital systems. There's a lot of reasons to want to be, in the Washington, D.C. market, but we've got these counteracting forces that, quite frankly, it's just hard to really tell how quickly they're going to shake out, either for the better or for the worse, and how soon that's going to happen. I found it interesting in looking at, sort of one of the worst top 10 office markets across the country right now. DC actually did not come up in the top 10, so maybe that's a positive. So Charles, before we move into data centers, what's the wrap up on the DC office market and the
Well,
current administration's
it,
policies?
it's a trouble. It's a troubled market to start with because it's been really hit hard by people staying at home, and Denver and DC both are blessed with a lot of very high skill, high education, highly educated people, and those are the ones that have the ability to stay at home and work from home. And we do have to
Right.
find ways to bring them back to the offices so that we don't have this 1 in 4 restaurants going down. I mean, that's just a terrible statistic. I would pray that the administration will do things more slowly, but maybe it is better that they just rip off the bandage and let things go where they may. I don't know, but this is one of those we shall see situations. We shall see what they're actually able to do, because whenever the administration does anything, we know that there's going to be lawsuits to try to fight their ability to do things so quickly.
Right. All right. Well, that's a good wrap up. Moving into a more positive note in the data center development market. As many of our listeners know, Northern Virginia and the Washington metropolitan area are one of the leading data center markets. It really is the leading data center market across the country. And a lot of our listeners also know that data center development has been ramping up very quickly for a lot of different reasons. But there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we think you may not know. So we're going to talk about some of those items today. So first of all, we have, as we said, we've got an unprecedented data center development market right now going on across the country. And while this started off, with the internet boom in the early 2000s and then accelerated with smartphones and things of that nature, right now AI is really driving the latest boom, and it's really accelerating. So right now we've got about 33 million square feet of space under construction data center development in the U.S. right now in 2025. And just as things are really heating up, and we're really at the beginning of this cycle, just as things are heating up, we're really starting to run into more constraints in the marketplace in terms of bringing these data centers to market. And we'll talk about what some of these constraints are. So number one, we'll go into these in more detail in a minute, but certainly energy constraints and sustainability is a big issue. In addition to that, some will say there's a scarcity of supply of land, power, and permitting. The reality of it is there's really not a scarcity of land. It's more entitlement issues, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. In addition to that, there's a trend towards we're going to continue to have large-scale central data centers. That's been a big phenomenon over the last few years, data centers that are 1 million square feet plus. We're also moving towards a trend of having smaller data centers sort of at the edge of the towns and cities, where they're needed. And then, there's certainly been advances in construction in terms of trying to bring these to market quicker, more modular designs, also more automated centers that are self-sufficient with advances in technology and AI. And then lastly, right now we've got a workforce gap really in terms of maintaining and managing these data centers day to day. It's estimated that right now we need about 2.3 million full-time folks operating these centers, and we've got a shortfall of about 300,000 people. So there's an effort to retrain people and also just offer new degrees in this area and try to bring more people into the workforce. So getting back to the power constraints, obviously this is a big concern. Our office is located in southern Frederick County, just outside of Washington, D.C. And as much as we'd like to see more data centers, in Frederick County, we certainly would like to see more data centers. But right now, we'll in the middle of summer, we'll experience some brownouts without the added demands to the system. So there definitely has to be upgrades with the power systems throughout the country. And what we're seeing is on the sort of more aggressive side in terms of bringing new power supplies to the system. Some examples in Pennsylvania at 3 Mile Island. Some of you may know that recently Microsoft entered into a 20-year power purchase agreement with our local Maryland energy provider, and that was the power plant was upgraded by $1.6 billion to make that happen, and that's where the power plant actually had set idle for basically 25 years since 1999, but more recently it's undergone the $1.6 billion dollar renovation. I'm going to stop there for a minute. I want to hit on some other items, but Brian, having been former executive director of Frederick County many years ago, and been involved in trying to bring many different types of businesses to Frederick County, biotech and others. What are your thoughts right now in terms of the region, Frederick County included, in terms of ability to bring more data centers online and some of the constraints?
Sure. It's interesting that both sides of the aisle, you'll find people who are pro data center, and then you'll find the exact opposite, those that don't want data centers. And it's usually because of the power grid situation that those individuals aren't in favor of data centers. Once we can figure that system out, that item, that infrastructure, I think, data centers will have a clear path to success here in Maryland. They've provided, as Chad said, a large number of high-paying jobs, the construction jobs alone, then the operational jobs. They provide tax revenues that most cities and towns, counties are never going to see, have never seen before. So you have to be able to, I guess, bring everybody to the table and figure out the power grid system. Past that, I think it's going to be a raging success.
Charles, any thoughts? Power constraints?
Has there been any discussion in that area of increasing nuclear power? I mean, that's not anything that happened quickly, but it seems that over 6, 7, 10 years, that might be a solution.
At different conferences, sorry, Chad. I apologize.
No, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
At different conferences, the micro-nuclear facilities have been discussed, although placing them hasn't been specific yet. In Maryland, in Pennsylvania, yes, there are some conversations about specific locations, and I believe has been recently in Virginia as well.
What is a micronuclear facility as opposed to a big nuclear power plant?
So apparently it's a compact facility, re-engineered, taking out some of the disadvantages and some of the, risk of a larger nuclear facility. And it serves a specific region versus being part of the national grid.
Yeah, and to that point, Charles, you may or may not be aware, but literally like within the last couple of weeks, Denver announced that they've launched a study to evaluate building a small nuclear plant out by the Denver airport, both to support the long-term growth of the Denver airport, but also to support growth around it, particularly data center development, quite a bit of industrial land around the Denver airport. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with in terms of potentially building that micro plant.
The last point I'd like to make on the whole energy situation is there's only 40% of electricity made in Maryland for Marylanders. The rest of it comes from another state. And so that's part of the issue, is why they try to use so many different other, solar, wind turbine, and other to build up uses. They also spend a considerable amount of money trying to diminish the use of electricity, for instance, LED lighting and incentive programs for that. So they're trying to be collaborative, but there's going to have to be more facilities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just back to the 3 Mile Island, it's actually, I meant to say it was Constellation Energy that had bought it in 1999. It sat idle for essentially 25 years until they recently struck the deal with Microsoft, and then they're making that $1.6 billion investment in it. So, and just in terms of outside of those examples of trying to meet the energy demand, there's a lot of other initiatives through different construction techniques and development that are going on. You're seeing more renewables as part of the build and supplementing traditional power sources. You're seeing other sources on site for generation beyond, they're hooking up to the grid, but they also have on-site generation with gas-fired plants, things of that nature. You're seeing co-location of data centers right next to the power generation plants. Again, all in the efforts to satisfy the power needs. So you're moving away from that. I mentioned earlier what some people term as a scarcity of supply, land, power, and permitting. We talked about the power, but from as far as the land goes, I mean, particularly in our region, the Washington D.C. region, looking at Frederick County and some other areas, we have a lot of land, but there are other constraints, and power is one of them. But also, as many folks know, data centers are, they're very loud, so they're seeing a lot of community backlash against data centers, and it's slowing down the entitlement process. And just by way of example, in Frederick County, there actually was just within the last few weeks or last couple of months, a temporary hold on any new site plans coming forward and or permitting for data centers. So essentially there's a hold on. Also in Prince William County, Virginia, there was a high profile, very large data center on roughly 1,000 plus acres next to the Manassas battlefield. It's been trying to start construction, get site plan approval for the last couple of years, and it's been a contentious fight there. And literally, like within the last couple of weeks, a judge ruled that it's not going to be able to come forward. So that's being appealed, but that's what some of these data centers are running into. And in addition to that, we're seeing, just given some of the challenges that come along with data center development, we're seeing different jurisdictions actually enact special, not in all cases, but in some cases, they're enacting special zoning designations for these data centers. And even where they're not bringing forth like a special zoning, they actually are pretty much making almost every data center across the country have like a special exception. So it might be allowed in an existing zoning designation, but they're having a special exception applied to them so they can look at all the different factors that are involved in terms of the noise, the power, and other considerations. So before I move on, talk about a couple other items. Brian, any thoughts on zoning, land constraints?
Well, there was a recent committee in Frederick County that went to attempt to say that no more than 1% of Frederick County could be in data centers. But from what we understand now, that even process has been tabled. Well, it doesn't inhibit the existing data centers from being developed. The power infrastructure, is the big thing. Sorry, it's just the way it is.
Right. Charles?
There's a movement out there that wants to get things done, big things done in society, but the challenge is always that you've got local, county, state, federal regulations, and it just completely stops everything. They talk about that with high-speed rail in California. You can't get anything done, but there's a big movement out on the liberal side of the aisle to try to find ways to, not knock out regulation, but work within it so that you're not stopped completely and running up costs on these big projects. And I'm hoping we can make that happen because these data centers are important. And I think it's a great boon to the region. It'll be a great boon for employment.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So with that, I think we're going to just wrap it up on that topic. Just a few big takeaways. Number one, we really are at the front end of the data center boom. And as I mentioned earlier, even though we've got 33 million square feet in the pipeline for 2025, that's just going to continue to expand exponentially. And while it is going to grow and expand, we have challenges that are slowing the delivery of product to the market. So it's going to continue to be a challenge, but there's a lot of different folks, a lot of money invested in the sector, that are trying to work expeditiously to resolve these issues. And just from a sort of a layperson's perspective, from an investment perspective, if you're not a real estate developer playing in the data center sector, there are a lot of REITs that focus, or at least a few REITs, half dozen REITs that focus strictly on the data center development sector. So real estate investment trusts, you've got Digital Realty Trust, you've got Equinix is another one, also American Towers as well. So it's a sector that we're going to continue to watch and follow and update you on, and probably give any opportunities and advancements there. So as always, we appreciate you joining us for our monthly podcast. We're active throughout the Washington, D.C. market, an extended Washington metropolitan area, same with the Denver metropolitan market. So here's our contact information. If we can be of help to you, please reach out to us. We look forward to staying in touch and hope you will join us for next month's podcast. Have a great day.